Okay, friends, we are back with another list, another reaction. This time we're looking at Loudwire. They published very recently, or I guess not so recently by the time you're seeing this, the 10 best album sequels in rock and metal. So November 8th, it is currently November 9th. So this kind of also shows you how early in advance I record these to sequence them out. So 10 best rock album sequels. So I already see a little bit of some examples on here. What really tipped me off was seeing Ziltoid and Dream Theater on here, and I keep forgetting that Alice Cooper Goes to Hell is a sequel to Welcome to My Nightmare, even though there is a sequel called Welcome to My Nightmare, which is kind of I guess it gets lost in the weeds a little bit. But yeah, we're going to find out and chat a little bit about these. So predictions, obviously we already know 3 on there. Meatloaf's, Bad Out of Hell 2, I would be shocked if it wasn't on here. I'd be shocked if it actually wasn't number 1. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I have to remember that it has to be rock and metal. So I guess Kanye's, what is it? His Dropout and Early Acceptance or something like that. The second album in his trilogy. That's not going to be on here, which is fine for me. But I'm also wondering if like Sola Gradius, I think it is, the sequel to Sola Scriptura from Neil Morse. It'd be interesting to see if that's on here. Trying to think of other albums that are. I'm going to do a shot in the dark and see if Hemispheres from Rush is on here, because technically the first track of Hemispheres is book 2 of the Cygnus X1. Cygnus X2, I think it is. I could be wrong, because that's how Farewell to the Kings ends. So we'll see. That's enough of me yammering on. I've been on here for 2 minutes already. Let's scroll down and see what we've got on here. So blah, 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 talking about it. And starting off, one that I should have known right from the beginning, The Parallax Part 2 by I almost said Images and Words, From Between the Buried and Me. Future Sequence, absolutely probably one of their magna opuses, which is so crazy to think about with Between the Buried and Me having a few magnum opuses, but I honestly consider this one to be their big magnum opus. Absolutely. 100%. Although I do wonder, because unlike a lot of other albums where they have the first album and then they follow it up with the critical success rather than going into it with a clear idea that it's going to be a sequel, because this one was made with the intent of it being the sequel of the the Parallax Part 1, which was just an EP. But yeah, absolutely. Great. Okay. Okay. Yep. Coheed and Cambria. Now, it's interesting because 4 is technically the third album, because the first album is more of an EP, number 2, right? And then we have the third album. So I don't know if God, Apollo, I'm Burning Star Volume 1, because technically wouldn't Volume 2 be the sequel to that? I'm just saying, I know I'm getting a little bit nitpicky here. But yeah, I mean, technically this is the third installment in the, I'm getting into the weeds of the Cambrian, the Coheed and Cambria output is so sticky. But technically wouldn't the follow-up album to this, because this is part 1 and we had part 2. Just thinking. Anyway, let's keep going on. Let's see what we've got next. Ziltoid, Dark Matters. Yep. I love this album. Not quite as good as the original album, if I'm being perfectly honest. I feel like it's a little bit, I don't want to say it's a step back, but it's a lot more polished. It's a lot more, I know, filtered through, where I feel as though part of the charm that was the original Zoltoid was how raw it was, how visceral it was. And this one held back a little bit. Now, it's still big. In fact, if anything, it's probably a little bit more produced. It's a lot more bigger in sound, which I really appreciate. And it's definitely the better of the 1-2 punch that was Z2, with Blue Sky being part 1 and Dark Matters being part 2. So yeah, great. Great. Okay, I'm glad to see Pain of Salvation on here. Scarsick, absolutely. Now, I'm not quite sure if this is like an official sequel to Remedy Lane. Yeah, honestly, 2017's Passing of Light is superior, but it's only reference to Remedy Lane 2. In contrast, Scarsick officially punctuates the psychological story of Perfect Element 1. Yeah, I guess it's a sequel. I never really actually considered it to be a sequel to the Perfect Element Part 1. But yeah, I can see that. I mean, I personally love Scarsick. I know not a lot of people are a fan of this one in the Pain of Salvation repertoire, but really glad to see it on here. Really glad to see that on here. That's a good pull. That's a good pull. All right, next up, Halloween. Yeah, okay, good to see Halloween on here. Keeper of the Seven Keys Part 2. I honestly completely forgot about this album, which is funny because like Halloween was just last week. But yeah, absolutely. Don't have a lot to say about this one. I don't return to this one quite as much as the rest, but no, it's a good time. Good time. All right, there's Alice Cooper Goes to Hell. Good to see that one on here. Let's see what they have to say, though. Welcome to My Nightmare. Despite not doing that, Going to Hell is... yeah, I mean, I enjoy this album. In particular, Goes to Hell kicks off things fun. Which I guess it does. I keep forgetting that Goes to Hell is the continuation of Welcome to My Nightmare. But I guess it is the continuation of the Steven story, right? If we're continuing the Steven story. So, yeah, there you go. Glad to see that one on here. Edge of Sanity, man, if we want to get some heavy stuff here. Yeah, Crimson 2. Cool. Glad to see this one on here. Absolutely. I don't have too much to say. I don't return to this one quite as often. But yeah. And Dream Theater. Yep, Scenes from a Memory. Absolutely can't go wrong with this. Probably their best work, if I'm being perfectly honest. Continuing one of the best tracks from their big track of Images and Words. It was always meant to be a follow-up, and I think originally they had planned this to be like a 20-minute just single track off of the Falling Into Infinity, but when it didn't quite pan out all that well, they decided to break away from the record industry and do away with producers and produce it just themselves. And it was a make or break album. And it made for sure. Yeah, good. River, man, this list is really doing well. Yeah, Riverside, Second Life Syndrome. Man, good to see that on here. Yeah, this is the middle of their Reality Dream trilogy with, I believe it starts off with Rapid Eye Movement. Yeah, good to see that on here. Emotional Spiritual, Out of Myself. Yeah, this is a great introduction to Riverside. A lot of people argue that this might be their best one. ADHD for me is still my favorite, but yeah. And again, it says that it's their strongest work. I think ADHD is probably their strongest work, but this has a lot of really, really good stuff on it. Holy jeez, you can't go wrong with this one. An Arion album. Hey, okay, this list is really, really surprising me on here, especially with Loudwire, because usually Loudwire is much more of a popular. Well, I'm a little bit more mainstream, but seeing so much great metal prog on here, it's great. Now, I'd like to see their justification, because technically, this album isn't a sequel; it's the source that is a prequel to it. So, but let's see their justification. I want to see their justification. Nearly every Arion album is connected with the same storyline. That's argued. However, is a direct prequel to the source. Yeah. So it's it's the most fitting choice. But see, again, I don't want to get weed down in the weeds. Like, I don't want to get bogged down in the weeds. That doesn't necessarily make it a sequel album. That just means that the source is a prequel. Like, you wouldn't necessarily say that, say, Star Wars: A New Hope is a sequel to, whatchamacallit, Rogue One, or even, Revenge of the Sith. Would you? Would you say that? Because I wouldn't necessarily say that here. But I'm glad to see that it's on here. Honestly, 100%. I'm glad to see that's on here because, as it's saying here, it has some top-notch players. Daniel Gilden-Lowe, Derek Sheranen. One of these days I'll get his Sheranen, I think it is. I don't know. Michael Romeo from Symphony X. So Annika von Gershenbergen, and Jonas Ringgold. 01011001 is one of my favorite Arion albums, and I'm so glad that he's bringing it to the stage. I can't wait to see what this is going to look like. But I don't know if I would necessarily say that it's a sequel, like a straight up sequel, you know? Yeah. And I think that's it. I think that's all 10. So I'm honestly shocked to see that Bat Out of Hell 2 isn't on here. I was sure that Bat Out of Hell was going to be on here. But, shocked to see that that's not on here. Other than that, this was a great list. Absolutely. Love to see so much, like, prog metal, like, standout prog metal. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm also surprised that the Deer Hunter with their, any of their acts were on here, because Coheed and Cambria's for God's Apollo was on here. I was surprised that Act 2 or Act 3 from the Axe series wasn't on here. Now that I'm kind of thinking about it, just trying to think of other sequels to albums. Anyway, great list. Oh, even The Great Adventure from the Neil Morse Band. That was a direct sequel to The Similitude of a Dream. So yeah, I'm just thinking that through, thinking about it, seeing what other bands, what other albums weren't on here. But no, great list. This is one of the better lists that I've seen so far, and has some really great proggy stuff on here. So yeah, I'm going to leave it with that. Thank you all so much for watching. Tune in next Friday for another List React. And I think that's all I've got for you guys. Once again, thank you all so much for tuning in, checking this out. You guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.